Well, the Big Easy didn't take it easy on the Dallas Cowboys in Week 2. 44-19 the final, as Nolans does everything and more to their game plan, getting things set for the Cowboys, and they handle the punishment. They hand the punishment off. 4 touchdowns for Alvin Kamara. The offense from Clint Kubiak was borderline unstoppable. The Cowboys have a lot more questions going into Week 3 than they ever had going into Week 2. Welcome into the First Word, presented by Dr. Pepper. We've got Barry Church, Isaiah Stanback, Nate Newton. I'm Kyle Yeomans, breaking down the instant reaction from the Cowboys' loss. And guys, it was reminiscent of the way the Cowboys played the last time they stepped foot inside AT&T Stadium. Not the memory the Cowboys fans wanted today, whenever the home friendly confines were not so friendly. But, I mean, fact of the matter is they just weren't good enough today.
Yeah, they weren't good enough today. And I believe the only, phase that really showed up today was special teams, the weapon that Aubrey is. Other than that, offensively, defensively, it was a no-show if you look at it. Defensively, there was 2 things that really stuck out to me and surprised me. One was the way that New Orleans was able to handle Dallas in the trenches. I mean, it was kind of a bully ball when you look at it. The way that Alvin Kamara was able to run the football out there, and the time they gave Derek Carr to go back there and pretty much pick apart this secondary. And the other thing that pretty much stood out to me was the explosive plays. Last week we looked at that defense, and they kept everything in front of them. They rallied, they tackled, they got pressure on the quarterback, and they made it look easy. Today, Derek Carr had all the time he wanted back there, and I know rush and cover work together. That defensive line and that secondary, they work together. But when that defensive line cannot get after the quarterback and he has time back there with the level of play that Derek Carr has had these past couple games, I mean, you look at it, he was able to pick this team apart, and the explosive plays were huge against this secondary and this defense overall.
Yeah, Dr. BC just hit on everything right there. I mean, the reality is Dallas could not afford to have a game against a high-powered offense like the New Orleans Saints. If you guys watched the pregame show, the one thing we said was New Orleans could put up some points. They did it in Week 18 last year with 48 points. They put up 47 last week against the Carolina Panthers outfit that nobody really knew if that was real or not. Well, you have to go back to last year to see that, yes, it is real. And this week it showed up again because we were unable to put some pressure on them, just like Carolina was unable to apply pressure. And when you don't apply pressure on a team that's used to putting up a bunch of points, they are going to ring up the scoreboard against you. It doesn't matter who you are if you have a star on the side of your helmet. Dallas did not get home. That means they gave up big plays. Offensively, where's the run game?
Yeah.
Where's the run game? When we had 68 yards rushing on 21 attempts. That's a 3-yard average, okay? You're not going to run that play 3 times in a row and get a first down. So they have to find some kind of a running game. And if you don't get that, then you're going to be asking Dak to throw yourself into victory. And I'm not sure Dallas has the weapons this year to get that done.
I mean, the explosive plays that Barry talked about, 70-yard bomb, 58-yard screen by Alvin Kamara. His game was just so complete. I mean, he had 15 yards rushing on 20 carries, and then he turned around with minimal catches and got another 65-yard. This guy played well, and I told you guys earlier, if he is on fire, Carr is going to do his business. And the difference between last week and this week is the quarterbacks. Yeah. This quarterback, Carr, is on fire, whereas the guy we played last week, he was kind of unsure of what was happening. That's why they was able to put the force on him. But when you have a running game, 190 yards between Taysom Hill, Jamal Williams, and Alvin Kamara. I ain't going to mispronounce your name, brother. All respect in the world. It was unreal. We could not set, and I'm talking about Mike, the coach could not set the defense. He didn't know whether to stay in base, which they started out the first half. They ran base, but they only ran 13 plays with, 17, 18 minutes into the game? Or they only had 13 plays. Most of them was the explosive plays that Barry talked about.
Let's talk a little bit more about that defense, because I think in Week 1, when you looked at it, you said the linebackers were flying around. There was sticky coverage on the outside. You played with some physicality. The defensive line held their own. I think all 4 of those elements took a step back this week. Yeah. All 4 of them.
Yeah, without a doubt. You talk about sticky. I mean, the offensive linemen for the New Orleans Saints, they must have had some type of stick 'em on them or whatever you're going to call it, because it seemed like those guys on the defensive line, Parsons, D-Law, Odigizua, those guys, they couldn't get off blocks. And if you looked at it, we understand the player that Parsons is. We understand that he's up for the Defensive Player of the Year, and he could be one of the best defensive players there is in the National Football League. But you got to be able to beat those running backs on a one-on-one blocks. I mean, how many times did we see in those explosive plays, they left Alvin Kamara one-on-one with Parsons right there, and he was able to pick up the block, and Derek Carr was able to step up in the pocket and get those huge chunks. That's why I say rush and cover, they work together. You know, the secondary back there, you can't cover forever. You need your defensive defensive line to get home, especially when you have a mismatch like that. When a defensive player of the year candidate versus a running back, you got to be able to take advantage of those.
Yeah, one of the things we were concerned about going into this game was the fact that what the New Orleans Saints put on tape last week against the Carolina Panthers was sideline to sideline, right? 53.5 yards, making you cover the entire field, whether that was with Alvin Kamara, whether that was with Taysom Hill, whether that was with Rashid Shaheed, or Chris Olave. They made you cover the entire field. And what happens when you start doing that is defensively, you're no longer crossing the line of scrimmage. Now you're running adjacent to the line of scrimmage. And if you guys can go back and watch the film, as we just saw it live, a lot of our linebackers were flowing across and not downs, right? So they overran a lot of plays. So those cutback lanes were there. Alvin Kamara was able to turn up. He was able to press to the outside, put his foot in the ground and get vertical because you're trying to free flow to the sideline instead of coming downhill and playing on your side of the line of scrimmage.
And to explain what Isaiah is talking about, everybody has to move lateral. That's from the one technique or your nose guard and your three technique. They have to maintain their gaps all the way to the sideline. They didn't. So now you leave a big gaping hole for your linebackers.
Yep.
They can't cover two gaps.
Yeah.
Our inside guys, once again, did not do their job. And then when they needed to slam up in there, they had no problems with their deuce block, center guard on the one technique, moving him out, going to Kendricks. They didn't have a chance. Yep. Our two guys inside the one technique over the center and the three technique over the guard has to be more consistent.
Yep. They were dominated in the trenches, both on the defensive line and the Cowboys' defensive line washed out of the play like you're talking about there. But then you flip it to the offensive line. Was that where the offensive struggles began in your eyes? Because Dak Prescott rarely had a clean pocket to throw. The guys, in terms of receivers, even then they were covered up all the way through. It just wasn't good enough on the offensive end, but where does it start for you?
Yeah, it's got to be in the trenches as well. I mean, I talked about the defensive line getting handled. The offensive line got handled as well if you look at it. I mean, Isaiah, you pointed it out earlier. Where was the rushing attack? We all understand when you have this Cowboys team clicking on all cylinders, they're balanced. They have a great rushing attack as well as Dak Prescott's able to pinpoint and pick apart secondaries. But when you take one of those aspects away and, like you said, force it all on Dak Prescott's shoulders, that's when it becomes ugly because he starts to press it. He starts to hold the ball in the pocket a little bit too long, and we saw those defensive linemen be able to get after him, punch the ball out a couple times, and like you said, those wide receivers out there, they were getting locked up. You need a little bit more separation. CeeDee Lamb can do what he got to do, but those other guys with those one-on-one opportunities, they got to be able to take advantage.
Yeah, and they have to find some more weapons.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I know we talked about in training camp, right? And a lot of content that we provided there was if one person goes down, if one receiver goes down, or one of your weapons, they don't have to be a receiver. Who was the weapon that was down today? Ferguson wasn't there. So who does it all fall on? Now it falls on CeeDee Lamb. Well, CeeDee Lamb, it was going to get double teamed, okay? Yeah, you're still able to find him from time to time, but you start being dependent on other guys who are unproven in this league. Jalen Brooks does a great job of running really good routes, but unfortunately just slipped a little bit, right? Force an interception. What does that now cause? Now that causes insecurities. That causes a lack of trust. And now your quarterback is second-guessing instead of being able to sit back there and just release the ball. This was a snowball effect today. It started up front with the offensive line. It's secondary. Second side of it was obviously the running game not being there. And now you're at a quarterback position where you now have to force it down the field to inexperienced guys.
Understand this. Zeke is a sledgehammer. We had to play him out of position. We threw him some screens, some outside pass. One move, he tackled. We can't have that. We have to have Rico Dowdle or either the other young guy, number 42, come in and make plays. Coach, you got to kind of put Zeke to the side sometime. He was not in the best position for him to be successful, and that's Zeke. And I thought I would never say that. I'm Zeke's man, but
no, I mean,
today he was just out of position.
That's the reality. I mean, there might be a situation now where you start looking at Cook, right? Bringing him up from the practice squad because now you need some spark. You need some juice. And the coaches, to your point, the coaches try to get Deuce Vaughn going early, right? They brought him in early. I think he got like 5 carries early in the game, but you can't just run him behind the guy behind the line. You have to find ways to get creative, just like the New Orleans Saints did. Alvin Kamara hardly ever came straight downhill. Yeah. Hardly ever came straight downhill. It wasn't until he got you going to the sideline that he started coming downhill. It's the same thing with Deuce Vaughn. You have to use guys the way in which they're most advantageous.
Well, and there's a lot of talk around, do you go outside for some talent at the running back position? I think today is a pretty good indication that you don't have enough juice in your running back room, because overall, when you look at the way that they've been constructed, and this has been one of the criticisms since training camp, they don't have the home run hitter. There were times today where they were creative and they were outside the tackles and had some space. There were a couple times when we're watching it, we're saying, oh, Deuce Vaughn's got some space. Oh, Rico Dowdle's got some space. There's even one with Ezekiel Elliott in space. And what happened? It took one tackler, one guy from the New Orleans Saints defense that took him down to the ground. You got to be able to evade tackles in space 100%. If you're one-on-one with the defender. They don't have the guy right now to do that in the running back room.
Yeah, they don't. I mean, you're 100% right on that. In the open field, you got to take advantage of that. That's one of the hardest tackles as a defender is when you got nothing but space and you see that running back one-on-one. He has a two-way go. That is where you got to make those plays. You got to be able to at least fall forward for an extra 2 to 3 yards out there. We just didn't see that. They got past the line of scrimmage, like you said, one tackler there to bring them down. And it's a wrap-up tackle. It's a wrap after that. You got to have more juice when you talk about the open field, and we haven't seen that from the running back room yet.
Good news. It's only week 2.
Yeah,
and it's only one loss. It was an embarrassing one, and it was at some points a pitiful one. But at the same time, the Cowboys have a long time to go this season, and they can fix some of these problems moving into next week. It doesn't get much easier, though, because the Baltimore Ravens come to town. Here's some of the stats, very much so one-sided in favor of the New Orleans Saints. They dominate the home opener for the Cowboys, 44-19 at AT&T Stadium. We have Cowboys OT and Cowboys game night coming your way. Further reaction following the Cowboys' first loss of the 2024 season. For Barry Church, Isaiah Stanback, Nate Newton, I'm Kyle Yeoman saying so long for the first word presented by Dr. Pepper.